Welcome. Is there anybody here for the first time that's never been at this meeting? I see a lot of new faces. Those of you that are new, this big book study is a little different from any other big book study, where in some big book studies you go around the room and each person reads. In this meeting, only one person reads. That would be me. But during the reading, there's crosstalks welcome. So please, if there's something when we're reading that you have a question or you want to shout something out, like when we're reading Bill's story, it's like, what's Armistice Day? And somebody will go, oh, Veterans Day. Oh, it's when the war ended. Okay, and we just keep moving. But it's kind of like sitting on the couch with somebody doing this deal together, so we kind of have an understanding. We're not just reading right past something that isn't understood. Or if there's a question, there's a lot of people here with a lot of time and experience that have a lot of really good input. So sometimes it's good to have a question going on. Sound good? Any questions? Right on. The other thing that's a little different is that we don't do the readings in the beginning, the chapter 5 and chapter 3, right? What we do is we do an overview of the big book, because when I was new, I'd walk in and I had no idea why we were reading what we were reading. So what we do is we do an overview of the book, so you know exactly why we're reading what we're reading and where we're at, okay? Make sense? So, this is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I first got it, I was like, well, that's awfully big. I'm not reading it. I'm just going to go to a meeting and hear what other people have to say about it and then repeat what they said. But once I went through it with somebody, with a sponsor that has a working knowledge of this book, I was amazed. Did you know these are stories and this is the first 164 that outlines our program? Stories, very important. But the program in the first 164 pages does not change. Does anybody here need a big book? It's a good idea to have a big book in a big book meeting. There's some up here to borrow if you'd like. So, the books up here are just the first 164, and that's what we go over in this meeting. There's been 4 different additions to the big book, okay? In each one of the additions, stories have been taken out, and stories have been placed back, more stories have been added. But the first 164 doesn't change, okay? Now, this is the contents page as it appears in the beginning of the book, okay? This is the 164 pages. So it starts off with the preface. In the preface we say, this is our book. The first 164 pages, there should be no changes to it over all the different forwards or additions to this book. There's a strong sentiment against any change. And we hope, and then in the back of it, it says, we hope when you read this, if you're an alcoholic or read one of the stories in the back, that you might go, oh, I felt like that. Wait a minute. I might be an alcoholic. This might work for me, right? That, me too. So our hope is that when you read this, if you're an alcoholic, that this will help. The forwards then, there's 4 different forwards for the 4 different editions. The first forward says, in the very beginning, the first page, it says, the main purpose of this book is to show you precisely how we have recovered. So there's clear-cut directions in the book that we'll point out as we read. There's also, so has anybody ever heard 90 meetings, 90 days? That's a suggestion, a very good suggestion, but it's not one of the directions out of the big book, okay? Then, in the second edition, we threw in some history. In the third and the fourth edition, the forwards to those, we talk about how we've grown and how many more people and how many more groups and what stories have been added and which stories have been taken out, okay? The big book starts right here at the doctor's opinion, right? Now, a lot of times in a meeting we'll read chapter 5. After we go through the steps in chapter 5, the reading, it'll say, our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostics, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, I'm an alcoholic. B, oh my gosh, no human power has been able to get me to stop. Something bigger than me is going to have to work, right? And restore me to sanity. Something bigger than me. God could and would if he were sought. Those are the basics of steps 1 and 2. And where are they found? Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures. Everything up until chapter 5 is basically steps 1 and 2. The original manuscript is up here if anybody ever wants to read it. But in there it says, right after the A, B, and C, it says, if you're not convinced, please reread the book up until this point or throw it away. But being convinced, you're now at step 3. So this is how we get to steps 1 and 2. It starts with the doctor's opinion. That's not Dr. Bob. Our founders are Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. This is Dr. Silkworth. He's the one that helped 40 to 50,000 alcoholics. Let's say we went down to Harbor General, right? And every time we show up there in the detox drunk, the doctor goes, you again. Sorry, we don't have a pill that'll fix you. You have this allergy. You're irritable, restless, and discontent. Something's going to pop. The only thing that'll fix it is basically a spiritual slap on the head that we doctors can't give you anything for. But whatever these men have to say seems to work. So in the doctor's opinion, you'll find A, B, and C. Or you might. And he says about the allergy, which is really important. Right after that, the first chapter is Bill's story. Bill Wilson, our first founder. He talks about his progression into alcoholism. And then each time he tried to stop on his own. Self-knowledge didn't work. And then stealing from his wife's purse. Depression. Until the message was carried to him and the importance of carrying it to another. Right after that, and there's a solution, we all chime in and we go, you know what? A lot of us were just like Bill. A real Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. If you think you're one of us, come along for the ride. More about alcoholism. We read it in a meeting, right? It starts off with, none of us wanted to admit we were real alcoholics, right? Nobody wants to say they're bodily and mentally different than their fellows. And just like in a participation meeting, there's a few different stories, right? Fred the accountant, Jim the car salesman, the jaywalker. So in there you might find that, me too. We agnostics, the whole chapter, because we've mentioned spirituality up until this point, we agnostics is basically a whole chapter dedicated to don't overthink the God thing, right? I haven't been able to do this by myself. I lack that power to be able to get sober on my own. So I need a power greater than myself, right? Because I lack that power. And it talks a lot about different scenarios about how not to overthink the God thing, but that's basically what it's saying. If you got a God, good. If you don't worry about it. Come along for the ride and go right into 5. Chapter 5, how it works, where we do A, B, and C, and then steps 3, self-will and riot, and what you got for me? Help me get out of self-will and riot so I can walk through whatever's in front of me today. And how to do an inventory. The 4-step, the dreaded 4-step. So we've got resentments, fear, and sex, and we start writing all this stuff down, and we're learning a few facts about ourselves, right? And then in chapter 6, into action, we have a sponsor or somebody, a closed-mouth friend, that we can read that 4-step to, and we learn about character defects and how to clear up the wreckage of our past, 8 and 9, and how to keep ourselves spiritually fit, because now we've kind of melted into something different, a new freedom, right? And a new happiness, rather than up here where we were just like, oh, why do I keep doing this? Right? And prayer and meditation. Now, the promises are also found there. Right after that, chapter 7, working with others, what do we do in order to keep that going, is step 12, which is what we started last week. So tonight, we're going to finish up chapter 7, working with others. It talks about sponsorship, the introduction, and not only sponsorship, but how we say hello to the newcomer. Even if you just have a couple weeks or a couple days or a couple months. We don't talk down to them from any moral or spiritual hilltop. We don't criticize, right? We just tell a little bit about us, see if we can be helpful, let them know about the book, right? After that, to the wives, to the family, afterwards to the employers. This book was presented. It wasn't like we had central office where we could just go pick up a book and we knew we were alcoholic. Other people were going to pick up the book. But there's a lot of good stuff in there about the description of the alcoholic and going back to work and what happens with our families afterwards. After that, a vision for you. Bill sums it all up, just like he does in a lot of the different chapters. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We only had like 2 years and less when we started writing this book. Here's our book, Don't Die. And our first story is always Dr. Bob's Nightmare, our second founder. Any questions? All right. So, chapter 7 starts on page 89. I'm going to do a quick review, and we're going to start reading on page 96. So this is all about step 12, right? Some of the directions I'm going to go over that we read last week. 1, don't start out as an evangelist or a reformer. Remember, there were a lot of people that wanted to keep prohibition and stuff like that, so they were fearful when somebody said, I don't drink anymore. And we don't criticize, never criticize. Don't deal with him when he's very drunk. You'll remember the hours spent with the alcoholic that's drunk. He won't. Never force yourself on him. So now, like I said, this is how, now that we've done all the steps, we can reach our hand out to somebody. And you can do 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12 from day one. The middle steps, 4 through 9, or 4 through 8 and 9 are all about the working steps, right? But 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12 we can do every day, which means we can check to make sure that we haven't harmed anyone, prayer and meditation, and reach our hand out to a new person, right? Leave the family out of the discussion. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak. I think we talked about, it doesn't say, tell the newcomer to shut up and they've got nothing to say. Take the cotton out of yours, stick it in your mouth. Now, yes, maybe there was a newcomer that talked for 20 minutes about their cat or their roommate, but somebody just said, shh, hold on, listen to what we have to, But it doesn't mean that we tell them to shut up. How else are we going to get to know whether we can be helpful to them? If he wishes to talk, let him do so. Be careful not to moralize or lecture. Explain how baffled you were when you stopped drinking and how you finally learned that you were sick, and let him draw his own conclusion. Talk about alcoholism as an illness, like the allergy in the doctor's opinion. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely, but he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He does not have to agree with your conception of God. And you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. So, I think one of the things we said last week was you don't go up to the newcomer and go, I have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. They're like, what? But if you go up and go, yeah, I drank a lot, and I got a deal. Oh, yeah, and then, I felt like that when I came in. They're going to feel more welcome to be able to feel comfortable here. Let him see that you're not there to instruct him on religion and outline a program of action. And make it plain that he's under no obligation to you and that he is under no pressure. So if somebody in your first meeting says, I'll sponsor you, and then you find another sponsor at your second meeting, and then you go, now I can never ever go to that club again because that person thinks, No, we don't sign any contracts, right? But on your first visit, make sure they've got a copy of the book. So on your first visit, make sure they've got the book. Lend them your copy, or we give out copies in meetings, right? Here's my favorite line in the big book. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Oh. If he's sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read the book or read it with him. If he thinks he can do it some other way, okay. To spend too much time on one situation or one alcoholic is to deny the opportunity for another, right? So don't go chasing after the person that's like, I really don't want to have anything to do with you right now. Somebody in a meeting might be there and you can help them. So on your second visit, they've got a book. They're interested in the steps, right? And the person comes up to you and says, I've read this volume, and I'm prepared to go through the 12 steps of the program of recovery. In other words, would you sponsor me, right? I'm supposed to say, having had the experience myself, that means I've done the steps, I know where to find them, I've walked through this book, I can offer much practical advice. And we talked about the difference between the clear-cut directions in the book and those quirky suggestions. 90 meetings, 90 days, very good. Based on my sober experience, that's a good suggestion, right? But let them know that there's a difference between what's a clear-cut direction out of this and what's your experience when you're helping somebody. And then a direction is to let them know you're available if he wishes to make a decision, the third step, or tell his story, the fifth step. Because those are the two where the clear-cut directions say you need somebody to do that, right? Somebody. So, I would say, having had the experience myself working these steps, I can offer much practical advice. I'll show you where the clear-cut directions are, and I'm available if you wish to do your third step and your fifth step, but I'm not going to insist upon it if you want to consult or do it with somebody else. I'm not going to go, you're fired if you didn't do your third step with me, right? No, but it is a good idea to do all your steps with one person so that you can connect all the dots and know better how to walk somebody else through it. Just my suggestion, not a direction. Now we're going to start where we left off. Let's say this new person that you're trying to reach your hand out to, he may be broke and homeless. If he is, you might try to help him about getting a job or give him a little financial assistance. But you should not deprive your family or creditors of money they should have. Perhaps you will want to take the man into your home for a few days. Be sure you use discretion. There's a story, what was it? Where Bill had the guy in his house and he burnt the furniture or something happened? Stole his suits and yeah. Use discretion. Now remember when we wrote this, we didn't have sober houses and detoxes and places like that. So we did bring alcoholics into our home. Be certain he will be welcomed by your family and that he is not trying to impose upon you for money, connections, or shelter. I had one person that said, I know how to work the steps out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not a bank, taxi, child psychiatrist, marriage counselor, but I know how to work the steps out of this. If you want that, I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from? But these are things that happen, right? Permit that by letting him use you for money, connections, or just shelter without really wanting to get sober. Permit that and you only harm him. You will be making it possible for him to be insincere. You may be aiding in his destruction rather than his recovery. Never avoid these responsibilities. Be sure you are doing the right thing if you assume them. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day, if need be. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep, great interference with your pleasures, interruptions to your business. It may mean sharing your money in your home, countless frantic wives and relatives, innumerable trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylums. Your telephone may jangle. How many people have a jangle on their phone right now? Jangle. Your telephone may jangle at any time of the day or night. Your wife may sometimes say, she's neglected. A drunk may smash the furniture in your home or burn a mattress. You may have to fight with him if he's violent. Sometimes you will have to call a doctor and administer sedatives under his direction. Another time, you may have to send for the police or an ambulance. Occasionally, you will have to meet such conditions. How many people had some of these scenarios popping up in their head while we read that? Oh, yeah. We seldom allow alcoholics to live in our homes for long at a time. It is not good for him, and it sometimes creates serious complications in the family. Though an alcoholic does not respond, there is no reason why you should neglect his family. There's a direction. You should continue to be friendly to them. The family should be offered your way of life. Should they accept and practice spiritual principles, there is a much better chance that the head of the family will recover, and even though he continues to drink, the family will find life more bearable. When we wrote this, we didn't have Al-Anon yet either, right? So we would have the wives of the alcoholic or the husband of the alcoholic helping the family members that were dealing with this, right? For the type of alcoholic who is able and willing to get well, little charity, in the ordinary sense of the word, is needed or wanted. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. Yet, we do go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things, when such action is warranted. This may seem inconsistent, but we think it's not. Use discretion. It is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. That often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of the dependence on God. How many people have heard that? Wife or no wife, job or no job? Right? Because we come in and we're like, all right, no, I'm just going to check in. I got to get this signed because I got to go get a job, got to get my car back out of hock, got to get my wife, got to, And we put recovery off to the side. That stuff comes next once we start working on us. Burn into the consciousness of every man that he can get well, regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trust in God and clean house. Now, the domestic problem. Well, there may be divorce, separation, or just strained relationships. When your prospect, your newcomer, has made such reparation as he can to his family and has thoroughly explained to them the new principles by which he is living, he should proceed to put those principles into action at home. That is, if he is lucky enough to have a home. Though his family be at fault in many respects, he should not be concerned about that. He should concentrate on his own spiritual demonstration. Here's a direction. Argument and fault finding are to be avoided like the plague. That's not just when we're new, huh? In many homes, this is a difficult thing to do, but it must be done if any results are to be expected. If persisted in for a few months, the effect on a man's family is sure to be great. The most incompatible people discover they have a basis upon which they can meet. Little by little, the family may see their own defects and admit them. These can then be discussed in an atmosphere of helpfulness and friendliness. How many people have come in and wanted the family back, or know, or have had the experience where it takes a little bit before they do? Almost all of us. I always say it's funny because, you've wrecked the car, you steal the car, you sell the car, whatever. And then I've got 3 days sober, I've got a newcomer chip. Why won't they give me the keys to the car? What's wrong? Gosh, don't they see? I really mean it this time. Usually with the family, after they have seen tangible results, the family will perhaps want to go along. These things will come to pass naturally, and in good time provided, however, the alcoholic continues to demonstrate that he can be sober, considerate, and helpful, regardless of what anyone says or does. Of course, we all fall much below the standard at many times, but we must try to repair the damage immediately, lest we pay the penalty by a spree, a relapse by getting drunk. Don't rush the ex. If there be divorce or separation, there should be no undue haste for the couple to get together. The man should be sure of his recovery. The wife should fully understand his new way of life. If their old relationship is to be resumed, it must be on a better basis, since the former did not work. This means a new attitude and spirit all around. Sometimes it is to the best interest of all concerned that the couple remain apart. Obviously, no rule can be laid down. Let the alcoholic continue his program day by day. When the time for living together has come, it will be apparent to both parties. That hit home with people? Here's a direction. Let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. This just isn't so. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. and a direction. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It is dependent upon his relationship with God. We have seen men get well whose families have not returned at all. We have seen others slip when their family comes back too soon. That's where I want to go. That's not what I want. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. Any questions yet? No? We don't want to get in the middle of things. So when working with a man and his family, you should take care not to participate in their quarrels. That's the direction. When working with a man and his family, you should take care not to participate in their quarrels. I knew somebody once that came to me and asked me a question because their sponsor that they had was best friends with the family member that had custody of their kids. And so every time she'd go to her sponsor and talk to her about something, it would go to the family members. And then this whole big thing was going on. And then she's like, and it was almost like having the family member sponsor them because they were giving direction to them based on what their personal interests were. No. Do we do that? No. Right? When working with a man and his family, you should take care not to participate in their quarrels. You may spoil your chance of being helpful if you do. But urge upon a man's family that he has been a very sick person and should be treated accordingly. You should warn against arousing resentment or jealousy. You should point out that his defects of character are not going to disappear overnight. Show them that he has entered upon a period of growth. Remember, let the ice cube melt. Ask them to remember, when they are impatient, the blessed fact of his sobriety. Does that always work? When I want something now and I want it now and I want it now and somebody goes, just remember, you've got today. Progress, not perfection. If you have been successful in solving your own domestic problems, tell the newcomer's family how that was accomplished. In this way, you can set them on the right track without becoming critical of them. The story of how you and your wife settled your difficulties is worth any amount of criticism. Assuming we are spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. Sounds like a promise, doesn't it? If we're spiritually fit, the promise would be that we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. People have said we must not go where liquor is served. We must not have it in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. We must avoid moving pictures, movies, which show drinking scenes. We must not go into bars. Our friends must hide their bottles if we go to their house. We mustn't think or be reminded about alcohol at all. Our experience shows this is not necessarily so. So, a few years ago, a friend was a bartender and was having a rough time. And so I said, I'll come down with you, hang out with you. And I was helping him bartend. Me being me, I decided to take a selfie at the bar, thinking it's hysterical. I got so much slack. Everybody's like, do you know in the big book it says you're not allowed to go into bars? You're not allowed to do this, and that you shouldn't be doing those things. And I was like, well, hold on. Let's read that again. Where did you find that? Oh, okay. But assuming that we're spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things we're not supposed to do. Now, does that mean when we've got 2 days sober we should be doing that? No, probably not. That would be a suggestion. Don't do that. But that brings up a good point. Sometimes we can go to family members and be like, nobody's allowed to drink because I'm sober now. 27 days. Right? Well, that's kind of just as selfish as when we didn't care when they didn't want us drinking and we were, destroying everything that was a family event, right? But assuming we are spiritually fit. And even if we're spiritually fit, maybe part of that being spiritually fit might be that we decide to say, you know what, my family gets really crazy. I don't feel comfortable around them drinking. Where else can I go? Hang around TLC during the holidays or, with a sober group rather than the family, or just touch base with them, be polite. I used to come up, or if I'd go out to dinner with somebody that drank, sometimes I'd come up with something where, did you want a drink? Let me buy you a drink. I had plenty before I got here. Thanks. Oh, let me know when you're ready for one. All right, I will. And I just would come up with creative ideas and ways to say no thanks without going, no, I'm an alcoholic. Right? Because sometimes that makes the person that's drinking uncomfortable. But each scenario is different. Just know that if we're spiritually fit, it doesn't say that we can do those things when we're ready to drink or feeling like we want to drink. But if we're spiritually fit, we can do. We can go to sober events in a bar where sober friends are playing, I've heard all kinds of stories on this. So assuming we are spiritually fit, and if we're not spiritually fit and our family or loved ones don't want to drink around us, allow them to do that. Allow them to support us. We don't have to take that big role and go, no, no, no. Wow, I just had a flashback. I was new and I kept rescuing my husband from certain shady places where they were doing other kinds of things, and I'm going to go rescue him. I've got 60 days now. I can go rescue him. No. But yeah, let your family support you if they do want to put it aside or not drink in front of you. Now, we meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. There is something the matter with his spiritual status. His only chance for sobriety would be someplace like the Greenland ice cap. And even there, an Eskimo might turn up with a bottle of scotch and ruin everything. Ask any woman who has sent her husband to distant places on the theory he would escape the alcohol problem. Bill and Lois did some geographicals to try and keep him away from drinking. Wasn't there a story where he left her at the Canadian border? He went to go get, I'll be right back, before they crossed, and he went to go get alcohol before he came back into the States and was gone with the keys. Anyway, ask any woman who sent her husband to distant places on the theory he would escape the alcohol problem. We can't shelter people. In our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. If the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up with a bigger explosion than ever. We have tried these methods. These attempts do the impossible have always failed. So our rule is not to avoid a place where there is drinking. Remember, squiggly lines, italics, kind of important. If we have a legitimate reason for being there, a wedding that everybody's been looking forward to and you're giving away the bride, right? Oh, I don't know, they might have champagne and toast the bride. What do I do? But if you have a legitimate reason, then you call somebody, get some support, get some backup plans before you do it. We don't avoid these places if we have a legitimate reason for being there. That includes bars, nightclubs, dances, receptions, weddings, even the plain, ordinary whoopee parties. There it was, the whoopee party. Oh, I miss the whoopee parties. To a person who has experience with an alcoholic, this may seem tempting. Providence, but it isn't. You will note that we made an important qualification, being spiritually fit. Therefore, ask yourself on each occasion, Have I any good social, business, or personal reason for going to this place? Or am I expecting to steal a little vicarious pleasure from the atmosphere of such places? If you answer these questions satisfactorily, you'll have no apprehension. If the answer comes and you're like, no, I'm good, don't overthink it. Go or stay away, whichever seems best. But be sure you are on solid spiritual ground before you start, and that your motive in going is thoroughly good. So one, we want to make sure we're spiritually fit, not on the verge of a relapse. And two, we have a good reason for being there. Do not think of what you will get out of the occasion. Think of what you can bring to it. Direction. But if you are shaky, you had better work with another alcoholic instead. That's a direction. So if I'm thinking of drinking or on the verge of a relapse, rather than doing that, I might want to go to a meeting and reach my hand out to somebody new, right? Why sit with a long face in places where there's drinking, sighing about the good old days? If it is a happy occasion, try to increase the pleasure of those there. If a business occasion, go and attend to your business enthusiastically. If you are with a person who wants to eat in a bar, by all means go along. Let your friends know they are not to change their habits on your account. At a proper time and place, explain to all your friends why alcohol disagrees with you. Just disagrees with me. If you do this thoroughly, few people will ask you to drink. While you were drinking, you were withdrawing from life little by little. Now you are getting back into social life of this world. Don't start to withdraw again just because your friends drink liquor. Your job is now to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. Those are directions. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand. That does not mean TLC. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. This is a shout out to Dr. Bob. You know, Dr. Bob kept liquor in his house. He said he had to learn to live with it. He had, I think, 2 of them on the mantle, right?
Yeah, 2 bottles on his nightstand.
2 bottles on his nightstand?
Yeah.
I thought it was on like...
Wild.
Huh?
It drove him wild.
It did drive his wife wild.
In the book.
And that's in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you keep it on the bedside table? When you keep it on the mantle, if somebody was jonesing or shaking, did you give them a little?
Or in...
You want to prove he could live in the face of alcohol. Yeah. That even though there's alcohol there, he didn't have to drink it.
He wanted to prove he could live in the face of alcohol.
I was trying to do that yesterday. I mean, for the New Year. I was trying to do that in the face of cigarettes for the New Year.
Ah. Now, so many of us keep liquor in our homes. We often need to carry green recruits through severe hangover. Some of us still serve it to our friends, provided they are not alcoholic. So what's a green recruit? A newcomer, somebody that's really shaky. Remember we talked about sugar and honey and different ways that we could help with the shakes. It's a detox off the sugar, but sometimes a shot will help too. And that was okay then. Sometimes we give them a shot and some orange juice and something else to get them through until the next day. That's a green recruit. So sometimes we often need it to carry green recruits through severe hangover. Some of us still serve it to our friends, provided they're not alcoholic. But some of us think we should not serve liquor to anyone. We never argue this question. We feel that each family, in the light of their own circumstances, ought to decide for themselves. Direction. We are careful never to show intolerance or hatred of drinking as an institution. Nobody likes somebody that's quit and now they're pointing the finger at you, right? Basically, intolerance or hatred of drinking as a behavior, as a whole, yeah. It's kind of like when I decided to stop texting and driving, and then I get behind somebody that's texting and driving, and I'm like, ah, man, they're crazy. What? What's wrong with it? I just passed by somebody that's texting and driving. I said, I texted to somebody. So just because we stop, we're not going to show intolerance or hatred towards somebody else that's drinking, or the fact that, you know, we want all the bars in Torrance closed down now, right? Experience shows that such an attitude is not helpful to anyone. So now that we're sober, we want none of the bars in town to be, no friends to be drinking. Nobody should, you know, that's not the case. Kind of like an ex-smoker that can't stand to be around people that smoke now. But we don't want to show intolerance or hatred of drinking as an institution. Experience shows that such an attitude is not helpful to anyone. Every new alcoholic looks for this spirit among us and is immensely relieved when he finds we are not witch burners. A spirit of intolerance might repel alcoholics whose lives could have been saved had it not been for such stupidity. We would not even do the cause of temperate drinking any good. For not one drinker in 1,000 likes to be told anything about alcohol by one who hates it. Someday we hope that Alcoholics Anonymous will help the public to a better realization of the gravity of the alcoholic problem. But we should be of little use if our attitude is one of bitterness or hostility. Drinkers won't stand for it. After all, our problems were of our own making. Bottles were only a symptom. Besides, by now, we've done the steps, right? We have stopped fighting anybody or anything. We have to. There you go.